Drama has always been a part of the Love and Hip Hop Atlanta set. Even the most seasoned cast members, however, were left dumbfounded by what just transpired. According to production-related sources, Rasheeda left the set in tears after Karlie Red's unexpected private revelation. As they piece together hints from the most recent teaser and behind-the-scenes rumors, fans are already giddy. However, what specifically did Karlie say that made Rasheeda feel so uneasy? Did it have anything to do with the long-running gossip regarding Kirk's covert life? Or did Karlie say something really unexpected that took everyone by surprise? After weeks of mounting anxiety, fans were about to relax until this heartbreaking revelation was made. Midway through the filming process, those fortunate enough to be on stage described the scene as being in utter quiet as Rasheeda stood up, her microphone still in place, and was clearly wiping her expression as she left the room. Additionally, several cast members remained still, uncertain of what to do next, while others attempted to console her. The spectacle was no longer only for the cameras. This really happened. Keep an eye out, because we're going to explain precisely what caused this event to be so memorable and why people are unable to stop talking about it. From the minute Rasheeda entered the set that day, there was a strange vibe, even not with the cameras rolling, but it was sensed by the whole production crew. There was a lack of the Castell's customary, easy laughing, informal side chats, and little jokes. Rather, there was silence. Silent motions, silent gaze. Everyone seemed tense, as if they all knew something was about to happen but were afraid to express it out. Rasheeda arrived on set with her trademark self-assured hairstyle. Although her outfit was well-tailored, her eyes sent a different message if you looked closely. They were less intelligent than normal. She had a harder time smiling. She continued gazing around as if she was trying to find someone or anything didn't know whether she wanted to watch. For this scenario, the producers had prepared a little lounge area, nothing ostentatious, with just 3 seats, a circular table, and dim lighting. Bambi and Karlie Red were already sitting and awaiting Rasheeda. With their hands clasped and their gaze down, they both seemed solemn. This isn't about lighthearted banter or casual catch-ups. According to the body language, Rasheeda greeted him politely as she sat down, but it was obvious that she wasn't feeling too chatty. She spoke in a tight, controlled voice. She looked straight at Karlie and said, "So, what's this about?" After a time, Karlie took a while to respond. Rather, her jaw tensed as she looked at Bambi and then back at Rasheeda. She wasn't like that typical sloppy energy. This was more purposeful and heavier. Bambi was the first to speak. "Look, Rasheeda, there are certain things, but we're not trying to ambush you or anything. Some things you should be aware of." Rasheeda's eyes squinted a little. "What kind of things?" Once more, a pause occurred. Everyone holds their breath during that kind of pause. Even behind the cameras, the crew seldom moved. Karlie finally leaned forward a little, quieter than normal. Her voice was serene. "It concerns Kirk." The environment was completely transformed by just 3 words. Rasheeda's whole face changed, her eyes darkened slightly, and her jaw tightened. A little, with a cold voice, she questioned, "What about him?" Karlie took out a tiny folder from the shelf next to her chair. It was just large enough to accommodate a few pieces of paper and was neither thick nor large, yet it felt very heavy. Karlie whispered softly, "I wasn't sure if I should say anything. However, I can't keep this to myself any longer after everything that's been happening." To Rasheeda. She moved the folder across the table. Rasheeda's hands were magnified by the camera as she took it up. Her countenance was blank, yet her finger was steady. The problem with true heredity is that it doesn't always manifest itself, like yelling or sobbing. Sometimes there's nothing but quiet. Too much quiet has been revealed. The folder gradually. The flight schedule was on the first page. Travel is Kirk's name. Dates that were inconsistent with Rasheeda's memory. Hotel bookings were shown on the second page. Kirk's name, the dates, and the city are all the same. However, the third page was the most impactful. A fuzzy picture that seemed like it was shot from a distance. Kirk was standing next to a lady, not kissing or holding hands, but near enough that it didn't seem to be a chance encounter. Everything was captured on camera. Rasheeda moved the page back and forth, gazing again and again, her hands trembling slightly, her cheeks tightening, her eyes blinking a little more quickly. Once again, as if she had misinterpreted it the first time, Karlie's voice was steady as she spoke again. "Bringing this to you was not something I wanted to do. I couldn't sit on it any longer. However, after all we've gone through," Bambi whispered, "we're only showing you this because we care, Rasheeda. The truth is something you deserve to know." Rasheeda, however, was not listening. she continued. To stare at the folder, she seemed to be keeping herself together with sheer willpower, as seen by the tenseness in her whole body. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally put the folder down on the table and carefully closed it. On top of it, her hands folded, fingers interlaced. Her voice was keen yet hushed when she talked. Karlie, how long have you been putting this off? Karlie took a deep breath. Some time. Why now? Rasheeda inquired. There was a little crack in her voice. Why are you showing me this now in front of the cameras? Karlie cast a downward glance, because I wasn't sure whether it was my place before. But after seeing all that was happening, I couldn't contain myself any longer. Rasheeda closed her eyes briefly and exhaled slowly through her nose, as if she was making an effort to relax. Then she got to her feet. Bambi stood as well, although she made no attempt to stop her. Karlie didn't either. They only saw Rasheeda silently pushing back her chair, picked up the folder and carried it as if it were 100 pounds. The words, "I can't do this right now," were said quietly by Rasheeda. On the last phrase, her voice cracked, "I really can't." Shortly after, she abruptly turned and left the table. She walked through the lounge past the cameras, which followed her. Producing team, she continued to record every breath with her microphone. Rasheeda didn't utter few words, just faint sniffles and the sound of her footsteps reverberating down the silent corridor. She stopped just when she got to the door and swiftly used the back of her hand to wipe her face. She then opened it and went outdoors. Just a quick return to the table without any fanfare or emotional farewell. Karlie and Bambi sat silently. Bambi ran her hand through her hair and sighed slowly. This isn't how I wanted to leave today. Karlie, she mumbled, without saying anything. She continued to stare at the door where Rasheeda had just vanished. She paused for a long while before speaking. The words, "maybe it was never going to be easy," were said softly by Karlie, but she knows now at least. A few seconds later, the team turned off the cameras, but the tension in the room persisted. Everyone moved gently and more slowly. No one wanted to break the stillness initially. Rasheeda was standing on the sidewalk outside, still holding the folder. She didn't answer the phone that buzzed in her pocket. It was most likely Kirk calling. She just remained there, gazing up at the sky while squinting at the tears that would not stop no matter how hard she tried to suppress them. As word of what had transpired began to circulate among the cast and crew, everyone realized that this was no mere hip-hop and love moment. This was genuine. This was profound, and things would never be the same again. Rasheeda was holding the folder more tightly than she likely imagined as she stood outside the stage. Every second that went by made the air around her seem thicker. Not a single camera was present, team pursuing her, and now the production had accepted not to shoot outside that door. However, phones continued to record remotely. Background team, grainy footage of her wiping her face with the back of her hand while standing still, as if she wasn't sure whether to move or simply collapse. There was captured by aides and even bystanders. Inside, the others remained seated. In startled silence, Karlie was still sitting there. Bambi had discreetly moved aside, holding a phone, but even she wasn't acting like herself. For once, there were no side remarks or whispered jokes. Everyone understood that this was too serious to be treated as a scenario from another show. In a secluded area, the production crew discussed whether they need to give Rasheeda some room or check on her. In the end, they agreed to leave her alone for the time being. At the same time, Atlanta was already hearing about what had just happened. Earlier in the day, bloggers who had been informed that a significant scene was being filmed began sharing ambiguous Instagram posts and tweets. Everyone who watched the program intently already had suspicions, even though no names had been announced yet. Fans were right when they began posting things like, "I bet this got something to do with Kirk and Rasheeda again." Rasheeda eventually stirred as the sun began to set. She took out her phone and placed a single, silent call. Not to production, not to Kirk. She gave Spice a call. Spice responded very instantly. "Hey Rasheeda, how are you?" Rasheeda was silent for a long while. Then her voice, raspy and low, came over the line. "You must come fetch me. 20 minutes later, Spice arrived in her vehicle. No cameras, no more personnel. She is alone. Rasheeda remained silent as she went into the passenger seat. She just gave the folder to Spice while gazing out the window. Slowly, Spice opened it and turned each page one at a time. The airline receipts, the hotel reservations, and the grainy picture. Spice's jaw clenched. "Oh no," Hiya Rasheeda said in a bland tone. "Are you sure? Is this true?" Spice asked thoughtfully. She understood how dangerous Karlie was, not because she didn't believe her. Presumptions could be. Slowly, Rasheeda shook her head. I'm not sure anymore. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. There was simply the soft hum of the Spice drove them off the set with the engine of the automobile. When they returned to the lounge, Karlie at last rose from her seat. She wasn't the kind to remain still. For very long, she couldn't sit and wait for someone else to make the decision, no matter how heavy things seemed just now. She ventured outdoors, but not very far. Just leaned with their phone on the building's side. Bambi joined her a minute later. Bambi said, "You all right?" in a quieter tone than usual. Karlie gave a shrug. "I'm not sure." Bambi nodded slowly. "I thought telling her would make me feel better, but it doesn't." Karlie laughed dryly. "Even when it's the right thing, sometimes the truth doesn't feel good." "Perhaps." The two of them stood silently as the last crew workers packed away their equipment and gear. Filming was officially over for the evening, and no further scenes would be shot today. At the same time, social media was exploding. Sirius had fallen, and fans had noticed the change in energy even without all the information. A few behind-the-scenes videos had emerged, but not enough to reveal Rasheeda's face. Became popular. Within hours, the hashtags #LHHATL and #prayer for Rasha appeared. Karlie just turned the entire season upside down. One blogger said in a mysterious post, "You guys aren't prepared." Kirk shared an Instagram story the same evening, but it wasn't a picture or a video, just a single line of text on a dark screen. There are times when quiet is required. The post was inundated by fans, with some urged him to make a statement, while others pulled him along with comments that demanded answers and asked what he meant. Ruthlessly, accusing him of lying for years, finally catching up, but as the hours dragged into the night, neither Kirk nor Rasha responded. When Spice and Rasheeda returned to Spice's house, there were simply two pals lounging in the living room with no cameras or crew. "You want to speak about it?" Spice inquired softly as she gave Rasheeda the peaceful music that was playing in the background. "Rashed." Shook her head and offered a glass of water. "Not yet." She sat for a long time, seemingly unable to let go of the papers she had on her lap. At last, she said something. "What's crazy?" With a low voice, Rasheeda said, "This isn't even about the adultery anymore. It's about the falsehoods. I thought I knew what was true for all these years, but Spice didn't. She just let her speak without interrupting. How many times did I defend him? How many times did I tell people things was different behind closed doors?" Rasheeda went on, her voice shaking slightly. Rasheeda laughed hollowly as Spice moved closer and said, "You ain't got to blame yourself for trusting somebody you love. It seems foolish today." The city lights were bright outside, yet everything inside was calmer, darker. Return. The crew was already having emergency meetings at production headquarters, with episodes to edit, video to analyze, and a cast to oversee while ensuring that things didn't go out of control. During the meeting, a producer raised their voice. "This isn't only we can cut down on another conflict, but this one is more significant and intimate." The other members of the team nodded in agreement. By the next morning, the situation had become considerably worse. Additionally, an anonymous statement was released to a gossip website by one of Kirk's former business associates, claiming Kirk had been operating games for years under the guise of fictitious business trips. Again, there is no hard evidence on these rumors. Whispers were plenty now, however, and fans believed what they wanted to think. As the morning light rose over Atlanta, Rasheeda finally came to terms with the fact that most of them now believed. KL decided to phone production herself, saying, "I'm ready to talk." Simply put, they set up a private cast-free confessional shot right away. There was no entourage or glam crew when she arrived, just Rasheeda, a producer, and one camera. She is wearing a basic blouse and pants, with little makeup other than a little gloss. "I don't know what y'all want me to say," she said after taking a long breath and sitting calmly while staring into the camera, "because I'm still working things out for myself right now." She refrained from crying on television. Did not bring her up. Voice, her tone remained calm and steady. It's one thing when her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Strangers have things to say about your life, but when it's people you trust, people close to you, ... that hits different. I'm not flawless. I never said I was, but I've always been honest." She let the stillness to linger for a long time, "So I have to decide what's real now, right? And what's not." She then folded her hands in her lap, sat back in her chair, and waited for the cameras to stop. However, the discussion was far from done. As Rasheeda's words, the atmosphere on the set changed once again as shooting got underway, and producers hurried to empty a private confessional area. This time, there were no interruptions, no background staff, just the director, Rasheeda, and a camera operator. Rasheeda showed there promptly, wearing casual attire, shoes instead of heels. When the cameras began to film, she seemed prepared, ready to say what needed to be said, her hair pushed back. She inhaled deeply and spoke steadily, showing no signs of the chaos below. She said, "I know you've all been waiting for me to react, but I wanted to do it right. I've been quiet too long. It's always been about showing off this season." So she stopped and looked down at her hands lying in her lap. The world, our accomplishments, our families, and our hardships. But no one ever demonstrated what occurs when trust is broken. Later viewers would observe how serene Rasheeda went on. Karlie laid those papers out in front of me, despite the fact that her eyes reddened with pain. I noticed hotel reservations with names other than mine, and airplane receipts for travels he never informed me about. She briefly closed her eyes as if she could feel the betrayal blazing in her gaze, and that picture of him with a lady I had never met. She said, "I felt everything freeze. For a while, I was unable to breathe because my heart was in my throat." She sucked in a weak breath, and the sound was muffled. I stepped away from the set because I needed space, not to avoid the reality, but to confront it on my own. No one behind the scenes knew why I did it, but the camera captured the little quiver in her hands. They felt I was being theatrical. But believe me, this wasn't theater. It was reality. I've spent years defending Kirk, telling people we were unbreakable, telling myself he loved me, he respected me. He'd never hurt me like that, she said, turning back to the lens. Rasheeda halted again, her voice catching, but the folder suggested, "Otherwise, I want people to understand that this is about living with the secrets, not simply about a guy coming out." Not only did I stop believing in him, but I also stopped believing in my own judgment. Fans would subsequently point to that. The statement as the point at which she ceased being the reality star and began to be a genuine person, and it came as a shock. "So, what happens now?" she said in a low, rhetorical voice. "Do we pick ourselves up and go on as if nothing had occurred, or do we allow the truth dictate our course of action?" No one on the team spoke, and Rasheeda allowed the stillness to linger, providing every home viewer with the opportunity to experience that moment with her. "I'm here to say, I'm choosing myself now," she said in a firmer voice. Fans would subsequently find that she leaned forward and gently slid an envelope toward the camera after saying, "Be honest even when it hurts, because that's the only way forward." As a counterweight to Karlie's folder, it included her own collected proof messages in which Kirk had said that he liked another woman's voicemail, which she had discovered but never played. She acknowledged that I was also hanging on to something, but I didn't realize I had my own until Karlie showed me something. Receipts. Everybody on the scene was aware that things had changed because of this event. Reality TV, though, seldom did. They seem as raw. Moments were often shot in confessional rooms. The camera cut, but Rasheeda didn't stand up right then. For a little while, she sat with her eyes closed, perhaps preparing herself for whatever would happen next. Outside of the confessional production, she wasn't really sure how to continue. So they just recorded there was no longer simply one plot thread, and the strongest cast member revealed her own realities in a manner that no one anticipated. Was a complex network of lies, betrayals, and emotional devastation. Later that night, mall workers hauled returning to a group setting, this time with Mimi and Karlie. The idea was to allow them to discuss it in person. But by this point, everyone was aware that the conversation was unique. Rasha was the first to enter the room, and it would be an emotional reckoning. She sat down, folded her hands, and looked straight ahead without turning to face Karlie. Next in line was Karlie, who carried a tiny purse and had a composed, controlled stance. She halted when she spotted Rasheeda and then took a seat across from her. Mimi sat uneasily between them, clearing her voice and fixing her microphone. "I understand that this is difficult," she murmured softly, "but maybe it's time to listen to one another." Rasheeda gave a little nod at last. She stated in a quiet voice, "You went through my personal life." She turned to face Karlie. I looked at her, and Karlie looked at me in front of everyone. "And I'm sorry you had to hear that." Karlie sounded regretful for once. This was genuineness, not the protective fervor supporters had seen when allegations initially began to circulate. "Maybe you already knew," I thought. Karlie went on. Rasheeda chuckled bitterly. "But I realized you didn't, and I couldn't keep it from you. Kirk sat with those falsehoods next to me, and although you couldn't hide it from me, he could." "That's not my fault," Karlie said, shaking her head. "The place seemed we all shared the guilt," Mimi murmured quietly as she saw the two women's pained expressions. "We made excuses, pointed fingers, and allowed things to boil for too long." Rasheeda leaned forward. She pushed back the tears that came back to her eyes. "So what now?" she inquired. Should we just bring him back in and cross our fingers? The door opened before Karlie could respond. Everyone paused as Kirk unexpectedly entered around lunchtime. He glanced at Rasheeda, then at Karlie. Just that tight moment, no words. Rasheeda almost got to his feet, hitting her chair. "Kirk," she whispered, her voice trembling, and she returned. "I had to," Kirk said quietly as he gulped. "Whatever happened, next would be recorded for millions to see. Karlie, the producer signaled to roll cameras. Observe both of them. The expression is unreadable." The camera focused on Kirk's face as he stepped toward Rasheeda, while Mimi sat between them, perhaps wishing she might vanish. "I'm sorry more than you can imagine," he said in a raspy voice. "And I know I hurt you," filling Rasheeda's eyes. "Sorry? Don't fix receipts," she snapped back, her face displaying intense hurt and rage. "Get rid of the falsehoods." Kirk's shoulders drooped momentarily, and Karlie's head jerked up as if she hadn't anticipated that line. When no one said anything, Rasheeda started crying uncontrollably. "I've given you everything," she said, "and maybe I made a mistake." The Kirk reached for her hand as the cameras filmed, but she retreated, taking a step back. "I'm not sure if I can pull this off," she said. "I'm not sure whether there's anything left to mend," she replied, her voice quivering. Karlie silently observed. Her own Karlie said softly, "Perhaps you both need time," with tears in her eyes too. "Determine whether what you have is still worth saving." With a look of amazement on her face, Rasheeda turned to face Karlie, and for a moment, it seemed as if that relationship, that friendship, may somehow heal. "I need to find peace on my own," Rasheeda murmured, her face hardening as she turned back to Kirk. "And I can't keep acting like everything is okay until I do." She whispered her tears as she left the room. Walking past Kirk and Karlie, Kirk dropped into the sofa, head in hands, and the camera remained on him for a long while. The encounter ended abruptly when the cameras shifted to Karlie reaching out and placing a tentative touch on his shoulder. The audience felt as if a fairy tale had been shattered as the set became quiet. As the rumbling of that unvarnished, unadulterated conflict went viral online, fans worldwide realized they had watched something that will forever define this season. The set seemed more empty than ever when Rasheeda left, and Kirk sat on the sofa with his fingers entangled in his hair. After a moment of hesitation, Karlie touched his shoulder. Touch, not a hug.